Many first-time homebuyers are surprised to learn that standard homeowners insurance doesn't cover flooding. Flood insurance is a separate type of policy, and it can be an essential part of securing a VA loan for some buyers. There are times when VA lenders will require a flood insurance policy in order to finalize your home loan. This specialized type of insurance helps protect both lenders and homeowners. Standard flood insurance policies tend to offer separate coverage for structures and belongings, and flood damage can be financially devastating. The average flood insurance claim, it's more than $40,000. So let's take a closer look at flood insurance and VA home loans. So once you're under contract on a home, lenders will typically order a flood certification for the property. Now that's likely to be the case regardless of where you're buying, whether it's in the desert or on a mountaintop. It's not uncommon for lenders to work with third parties for the flood certification. These companies will evaluate the property based on current flood maps from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, along with maps, parcel boundaries, and other tools. FEMA administers the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, which covers most communities in the country. Generally, if the property is in a flood zone, buyers will need to obtain flood insurance, either through the NFIP or from a private insurer. But these aren't always black and white scenarios. It's possible for part of the property to be in a flood zone while the home itself is on higher ground above the base flood elevation. Flood maps will typically make that determination, but not always. In some cases, would-be buyers can hire a surveyor or an engineer to map and certify the elevation of the property. The buyer can then basically petition FEMA to update their flood map. Now, lenders would need FEMA to make the change and then get a new updated flood certification. Otherwise, the borrower would be on the hook for that flood insurance. Now, in addition, some communities aren't part of the NFIP. Now, FEMA won't have flood maps and flood zone designations for these areas, but lenders are still going to require a flood certification for properties in these non-participating communities. In these cases, prospective buyers will often need a professional elevation certification to prove the home isn't in a flood zone. And you might run into difficulties in these non-participating communities if it turns out that flood insurance is required. Policies and guidelines on this can vary by lender. At Veterans United, we will not currently lend on a property that requires flood insurance but isn't located in a community that participates in the NFIP. Now, in terms of paying for flood insurance, borrowers will often need to pay that flood insurance premium up front. It's often an upfront expense, but it's possible to pay it at closing. In either case, VA buyers can negotiate with a seller to basically reimburse this cost at the closing table. That's ultimately going to be part of your overall negotiation with the seller regarding all of your VA loan closing costs. Now, similar to homeowners insurance, buyers will have to escrow funds for flood insurance, and lenders will consider those expenses when looking at things like your DTI, your debt-to-income ratio, your residual income, and other qualifying ratios. Prospective buyers might also be able to assume the current homeowner's flood insurance policy. Last, it's also important to understand that the home you're buying might not be in a flood zone today, but it could be tomorrow. FEMA does update flood maps when warranted, and that means that your property could require flood insurance later in your mortgage term. Now, the government notifies mortgage servicers when this happens, and it's the servicer's job to let affected homeowners know that they now need to get flood insurance. Talk with a loan officer if you have questions about flood zones and flood insurance. Depending on where in the country you're buying, this is key information to have at the start of your home buying journey.